Hello everyone, it is Joe here from Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. Today we're going over my top tier tweaks just in time for Salt Lake City, going over what I think are some of the top decks in the game and where my head's at with these lists as we are getting close to SLC as well as Liverpool for myself next weekend. Of course, we'll have a whole set of extra results to look at in that instance, so there could be some more knee-jerking by the time we do get to Liverpool. But let's start off with Mew, and I believe since Natalie Miller's performance, Double Turbo Energy has gone massively up in stock, and I think the majority of decks that you'll see of Mew will be playing triple Double Turbo and trade out Training Court for probably Old Cemetery as the backup stadium if you are trying to have more than the 2 count that Natalie herself actually played. So I'm actually going slightly against the grain, keeping some faith in Fog Crystal because I do believe it's nice in the opening turns. It just helps you go wider, and that can never be a bad thing, trying to make the most out of your Genesect ability early on in the game. I'm sacrificing a Cram and a Rotom to play this mini Fog Crystal Psychic Energy package. If I was to cut the Fogs and the Psychic, it would easily go to the 3rd Double Turbo Energy. I think at that point you have to play the extra Choice Belt as well. So then you only really gain the 1 space for like the extra Cram back. So if you're not on the mini Fog Crystal package, feel free to have those other cuts. But outside of that, I think Echoing Horn, not only great for the Duraludon matchup, which got second in Brisbane, also very good against pretty much every Arceus deck that I've run into recently. It's a great way for you to be able to put all your tablets into like one Arceus and then deal with an Echoing Horn later to get a regular V back for easy boss KOs. And yeah, I think this deck is pretty much going to be very close to where most people land. I don't think there's much else you really need to do with this list. I think there could be some going all the way up to 4th Stadium, which is probably that Old Cemetery, like I said, coming back in. Or even Shopping Center if you're not playing the basic energy and you go up to 2nd Choice Belt, then Shopping Center is a reasonable 4th stadium. If you want to have 2 Rose Tower, 1 Old Cemetery, 1 Shopping Center, that could be fine. I do think a lot of people are going to be increasing their path counts. We've recently seen Jolteon do quite well, so 4th, that's a 4 copy of Path deck a lot of the time. Gengar could be playing 3 or 4 copies. Arceus decks could go above the 2 count that we've seen a few times, but I think in general, very consistent, very fast deck. It can win on turn 2, as you know, or it can win turn 1 going 2nd very easily just by blowing up your opponent's active Pokemon, especially if it's a 2-prize Pokemon. You can really just punish bad starts from the opponent much better than any deck in the format. And there's not been a huge pull towards like full-on Crobat Luminion engines. People are sticking with the Intellion engine, which gives them slow starts very often. They're normally just working with the 7 cards that they've drawn, so it's actually a bit of a struggle for other decks to get like multiple V Pokemon down, especially if it's an Arceus deck. It's like a huge sigh of relief if they get double Arceus down, as well as some extra like Sobbles and whatnot. So you really are a big punisher. You will steal a ton of wins with this deck just because Echo on turn 1 going 2nd is crazy, or because you've gone 1st and you've bossed their lone V Pokemon turn 2. Yeah, it's a huge win condition. The fear factor mostly is going to be these Path decks, and yeah, you have Rotom Phones, but Judge is becoming a card now, so a little bit sketchy there. You could go higher on the stadium count to be even safer if you wanted to. From this list, I think if you want that 4th stadium, honestly, I'd just go to the Double Turbo build. I'd cut the Fogs, I'd cut the Psychic, I'd go Double Turbo, Choice Belt, 4th stadium. Or up to 4th Cram and just keep with the 3 stadiums. That would basically be the spaces. But yeah, I think this is a pretty decent core. Oricorio, just a quick note there. I do think there still will be enough like Hooper Malt style decks around that it's reasonable. Malamar's in the discussion today, so I respect that as a 1-prize archetype as well. And actually, thanks to triple Double Turbo lists of Mew, this is actually decent in the mirror now, where if the opponent has Double Turbos remaining and they're trying to get through one of your Mew VMAX, if they have Double Turbo and you have Oricorio down, it forces that 5th modifier, which is very awkward for them, so you can actually push them back out of range with this Oricorio. So it's technically decent in Mirror now in certain spots. And it can also be useful in certain spots against Arceus players, especially if you scout that they don't play Choice Belt. This is a really good early drop to like sparkle to 2 Mew Vs. If you have Oricorio down, you're protected from an early like Arceus KO, and then you can sparkle again, and suddenly you're not spending tablets, but you're still getting one-hit KOs copying Melodious Echo. Quite specific things. There are definitely times when you weave in the Oricorio and it feels great. And for the majority of the time, it helps the single prize matchups. So those are the big things that I like the most about the Oricorio. I do think it's one of these cards in general that you have to weigh up the power of just drawing more with the Genesect the entire game versus this, but also having some redundancy of having an additional single prize Pokemon is also really good in the Mew Mirror, because as the player going first, you want 2 single prize Pokemon in play. To try and force that map and at least make them go through a VMAX once in the game to make them juggle their resources as they draw through their own deck and retain cards in hand like power tablets. So yeah, plenty of reasons for this extra single prize Pokemon. So it's one that I'm debating massively. I've played many games of Mew without this card, but there are just enough spots where I think it's worthwhile right now. Let's look at some Intellion Arceus then, which I think is probably, for most people, going to be the second most popular deck. And I think this is a pretty straightforward list of it. I really value playing a high counter ball search in this deck, because like I said with Mew, most of their wins against Arceus, you know, is going to come from them getting out of path lock and them just cheesing you early with aggression, and you've only put down one Arceus, and you twiddle your thumbs as soon as they knock it out. So going up to that second Ultra Ball, having 4 Level Ball as well to present a double single prize threat turn 1 as the player going first is really important. Outside of that, we've got the Judge in here to help play around Rotom Phone as alongside the path, which is of course important. I'm only on 2 path, and I am playing 1 Collapse Stadium, because I do think you could easily face 2 mirror matches if you're the player playing Arceus Intel right now, because it does seem to be rising in popularity quite drastically and is becoming the forefront of Arceus builds. So I would certainly expect it, and I want an out to be able to Starbirth myself. This is probably the best option as well, because Collapse Stadium can even against Mew as a third stadium, like obviously you want your paths against Mew, but the Collapse Stadium can deny Echoing Horn plays, which is at least something for you, and try and make them go through 2v stars, which is like kind of more resource intensive. But also it's good in mirror match situations as almost like a third copy of Sharon's Care, where you can tank that hit, retreat, collapse away, and it's like a heal play that you can do alongside a boss's orders or another line, which is really nice, I think, for the most part. So it's almost like filling a Palpad spot, I think, in some instances, where it's like the extra Sharon's Care here and there. Palpad, incidentally, is an interesting card. Also, Catch Energy is something I've juggled in here before. I could see the water count going as low as 5. It's a little bit awkward, because obviously you don't want to be missing from your Trinity Novas and whatnot, but I do think you could go that low if you wanted more Capture Energies in the openings. I've actually toyed around with just 3 Double Turbo Energy quite a few times in this deck. It does put more pressure on your Starbirth, always tutoring out this card, but I don't think you really need 4 very often in games. It really just safeguards you around your opponent pathing you and Marnieing you and that sort of thing. So that's like the biggest reason I'm still on 4, but I could easily see that also becoming a space if you want to wiggle something into this list. One thing you may notice is that I'm not playing Dunsparce right now. I feel like of the top decks, you know, you're not going to face fighting stuff in Mirror, most likely. You're not going to face anything against Mew. That's already like 40% of the field day 1, I would say. Then there's other Arceus decks, which are typically splashing in Dark rather than fighting. Especially if people are picking up like the Hooper Moltres Arceus deck, which I'll talk about momentarily. Gengar, yes, probably will be playing Stonejourner, but it's already a deck that puts 3 prizes into play against you, so it doesn't change the map that drastically, so that should be fine for you anyway, even like getting hit for weakness in that instance. So I think it's actually very niche where that's a problem, and Zapdos on the whole, you know, firstly you play Path, so your opponent already has to find the out in some instances, but also it's low enough hit points, especially with Quick Shooting and Choice Belt in this list specifically, that you probably just trade 2 for 2 against a Zapdos, and typically that's not that bad for you if your start has been good anyway. So I'm preferring a 4th level ball over a Dunsparce. That's my logic. I just want to be more consistent, simple as. And I think Dunsparce is not necessarily bait right now, but I don't think it's valuable in like a high percentage of matchups. So it's a small risk that I'm taking that you may not be taking right now. But I don't think it's that important, to be honest. Unless we start seeing this wave of random fighting like tech Pokemon coming into decks, hoping that like they gust and knock out a Dunsparce and then they start hitting you for one shots. They'll be doing that against you a bit more aggressively, but I don't think that's the top of the meta right now. So I'm trying to buy that space here and there. But yeah, this is my Intellion. I'll be honest, I don't love this deck. I'm terrified of just jamming games into Mew and hoping that Marnie Path sticks is not a great feeling. It's a good feeling if people are picking up Natalie's exact 60 and only playing 2 stadiums, then it feels really good. But I do still think they can play the game under Path quite often and still keep up in tempo against you, especially if the Path is hurting you just as much. So, if it's pre-Starbirth, for example, and you've just had a slow start, so you've thought maybe I can Path here and give myself some protection of my like lone Arceus, because sometimes those will be the hands that you're dealt, right? So some stuff here. I'd be surprised if this didn't do well, but also I can see more experimentation with Arceus, which brings me on to another deck that I'm enjoying a lot, actually. I've only just started testing this list because it's come to us from Brisbane, where it got top 4, and I've made a few tweaks here and there, not too crazily different, and still keeping the core concept of still loving the Intellion engine as a partner for Arceus, so you're not just crumbed by Path immediately, and so that you have great tutoring of certain cards. Like we've seen with the Hoopermolk deck in general, you still have these 2 attackers. Obviously, late game Fiery Wrath is crazy, and is obviously very good against Mew in general. But alongside Quick Shooting Pings, this is just a good card in the game, honestly, with the double choice belt selection in here as well. This gets their very high late game numbers against every deck, to be honest, and can try and offset that prize race, which is never a bad thing. So compared to the list we saw make top 4, I've got the additional Arceus, and I've also got 2 Capture Energies in this list. Like I said, I've had them in and out of my regular Intellion list, but I feel like they're worth it in this list specifically for that extra consistency. It's great to have Capture Energy on keep calling plays. It's great to put it on Arceus, of course, even getting out additional Sobbles, so very good card overall. You have the Raihan Direflame Wings plays with the Galarian Moltres V. And what I actually think is really important is that this deck plays the double Clara, which you all obviously know about the Hoopermolk build, but this is a way that you can actually play around Echoing Horn, where early game you put this 2-prizer into play, and even you put double Arceus down, for example, or you put Arceus Moltres down, the opponent can target these, but then you can Clara them back into your hand to protect them from an Echoing Horn just naturally, whilst you recover Dark Energies, which helps out with Malevolent Charge. And that's actually really important against Mew. So I do like that you can actually turn yourself back into a Puritan single prize deck and deny the Echoing Horn in certain spots. Obviously, there are turns where it can't be possible, and you're vulnerable to them hitting their one-of. But sometimes they may not consider going for the Echoing Horn on that specific turn, thinking that it's there for them later, but of course you can Clara it back. So, yeah, some good intricacy to this deck. I personally prefer trying to race a Mew than hope a Path sticks. That's just my opinion. I think it's a stronger strategy. But we know that Arceus Intellion is a pretty strong pairing, and having the dark stuff in here just gives you a bigger late game push a lot of the time, and it gives you turn 1 tempo, which is 2 very good things. Outside of that, I think from the list that was played, I play like an additional net, 1 less balloon, and I play the additional Coco, just because I want a higher amount of physical individual 1-prize Pokemon, just to have dual 1-prizes turn 1 if I'm the player going first. So against Mew, I don't just get blown up by a escape rope or something. So yeah, that's a deck that I've really been enjoying trying, and actually like probably my favorite Arceus deck right now, over the straight water energy. Like the upside of water is that you get to attack with the Shady Dealings Intellion, but that's not like a big enough upside, especially compared to like a Baby Molt. But yeah. So that's it for Arceus decks, really. I imagine there could be way more Arceus decks, actually. I'm not going to look at Duraludon today, mostly because I think it doesn't change. You're worried about Echoing Horn coming out in the format, but I don't think you can necessarily do anything in your list to change Duraludon. So I think some dark pairings of Arceus are going to make a splash and be more popular after they gain some confidence from a top 4 in Brisbane. So yeah. Speaking of dark stuff, Gengar, I know there's a lot of murmurs about this. You have the one-hit KO potential into Arceus, as well as Dark typing for Mew. You're playing your path stuff. I've not changed the list since the video on the channel. I like Bibarel as that 1/1 count. Yes, it's annoying if it's prized, but you're not dedicating so much space to a card that basically only ever becomes a one of in play, and is basically always ignored by the opponent because they'll probably target Houndooms or just target your multiple prize Pokemon anyway. So Bibarel's normally left to his own devices to draw you some extra cards, which is never a bad thing. I know you could go even higher on the path count because it's very good to just play it on 1, so I'm all the way up to 8 energy. I know a lot of people drop down to that 7 to play the 4th path. That's completely up to you and is fine by me, to be honest. But yeah, Gengar has a lot going for it. If you want to see the list in action, you can, and I discuss the list completely there. Just cross your fingers with Gengar, right? Because it can brick and be very sad. But it has a natural, decent matchup into the top 2 decks at the very least. Other stuff, yeah, that's when it gets dicier. And then for a pure single prize deck, now that the Hooper Moltres basically morphed into an Arceus deck somehow, this is probably the best Puritan single prizer that we have, and it's Rapid Strike Malamar. I do think it struggles slightly with the amount of Intellion still in the formats, because there's classic quick shooting net plays the opponent can make to make life awkward for your little 50 hit point Inkays here and there. I am playing Manaphy kind of for that reason, actually. It protects you from Aqua Bullet, which I think is really important. And at the same time, it gives you a win con against Jolteon, which is a rising deck in popularity, I would say. It's getting back on that radar that little bit. So having that protection, as well as just being useful against Intellion engines, which most Arceus decks probably are playing Intellion now, it seems valuable enough for me, even if they're not playing that water energy. Just having that defense against it is nice. Outside of the normal stuff, Intellion build seems to be back in favor. People experimented with Cincino, but Intellion, we've been pure and straight on Intellion this entire time on the channel, and trust me, we think it's the best. The only real spice in this list is that I play a copy of Escape Rope. I prefer this to Boss because it's way easier to weave in on turns, and I found it very helpful against Mew for their Psychic Leap strategy, where they feed 1 prizes into you here and there and whatnot. The Rope is a great end game play where you only need to like deal with a Genesect or something, or like a Mew V that they throw at you. It can really help your numbers, and it can be used alongside a Cynthia's Ambition, which is something that you can't do obviously with Boss. So I feel like this is way safer, and I think it's just a better card to weave in. It's not like Boss where it gets trapped in the hand so easily. It's a card that you can at least play to throw it out there if it's not helpful at the time, but you just need a better Cynthia's Ambition. So it's kind of like a decent option that still gives you some push potential to stop yourself having to have like a full 8 prize game against Mew. So I think that's pretty nice. And it's also a bit of a spanner in the works for Arceus players as well. Sometimes they're forced to feed you quick shooting, which is actually really good, even though it's just a single prize. Sometimes you're scared of your Inkay getting knocked out on the same turn as the Malamar, right? So the Rope has been pretty handy for me overall. But outside of that, we're sticking to the normal like high ratios of everything. If you want to play the second carrier or the second rod, be my guest. I would play second rod if I was scared of Duraludon. I would play second carrier if not, because it gives you better immediate value for tempo as a Shady Dealings target for plus 80 damage in the mid game. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Rapid Mally. If there wasn't so much Intellion, I would be pretty happy playing this at Liverpool, actually. I'm slightly afraid of just how much quick shooting there is in the game, and that's actually what's keeping me off Malamar right now. I'm happy to see like Weezing's gone away, basically, in favour of other builds of Hooper Molt. That was a previous concern I had with this deck. But I think now it's just a wave of quick shooting that's slightly scaring me playing this. But I'm quite happy into Mew, actually, with this deck, surprisingly enough. They put you on a clock here and there, but especially the triple-double turbo build, they struggle at finding good leap plays, especially in that like late game. They can only leap a couple times, and they're normally having to gust around your Mally, which, although it's like knocking out Sobbles and stuff, which is annoying, because they can only triple power tap at one time, your Malamar stays around, and that's something that you normally have to spend hand resources to like re-accumulate. So actually it works out better for you. So that's one of the reasons why I'm actually on the basic Psychic in my specific Mew. But yeah, that's the 5 decks. I'm still on the Mew train. I know it's going to be targeted. I know you're going to have to face a handful of paths here and there. You're going to have to face mirrors. You're going to have to face dark decks. But Mew can tackle all of them. And I think in best of 3 scenarios, Mew is still crazy because all these other decks don't draw as well as you do and can't handle the pressure that you can put out with this deck just far too often. Turn 2 boss KO is still deadly. Turn 1 KO 2 Prizer with Echo is still deadly. That doesn't change, and you still have more draw than most other decks. Even though there are path turns, you can still try and set yourself up defensively with Rotom Phones here and there to put yourself in good stead. And at the worst of times, sometimes you get manied into your stadium, or you get manied into that cram. You're flipping the coin, it doesn't feel good, you're going to have some heart palpitations playing Mew, that's for sure. But sometimes, you just hit that heads and you're laughing again, and you've completely blown the opponent out of the water. So, yeah, that's my thoughts. Outside of these decks, I think, like I said, Jolteon is slowly creeping up in popularity. But also, like I said about the Arceus Intellion deck, I'm not a huge fan of the Path and Pray strategy. If you prefer the Path and Pray strategy, that's up to you. There's no real need for me to show the Jolteon off anyway, because it's basically the same deck as it has been always. So there's not too much to tweak in that instance. So yeah, that's really where I'm at with decks. Good luck to everyone at Salt Lake, and we're going to analyze the results over the weekend. We're going to be watching the stream as well. There is an official stream going on, casted by Pokemon. So I'm really looking forward to tuning into that whilst I get some more testing in for Liverpool, which is the following week. So yeah, stay tuned, guys. Thanks so much for watching and listening to me ramble while I throw pretty standard lists at you, to be honest. Yeah, I'll see you in another video soon. Cheers.